Just catching you up, and I'm sure you've probably heard this, but we want to get you the newest information. We want to put this in context, more importantly, because there's a lot of questions around it. And I want to read you this paragraph from AP News that kind of sums this up. So, a vote to end the government shutdown hours after it began failed today, Wednesday, as Democrats in the Senate held firm to the party's demands to fund health care subsidies that President Donald Trump and Republicans refused to provide. Again, that's just a couple of sentences from AP News, and it kind of gets to sort of the root of the issue. I want to bring in Dr. Scott Huffmon, political science professor at Winthrop University in South Carolina. Dr. Huffmon, thank you for your time.
Oh, my pleasure to be with you.
A lot to unpack here. Let's start here. Again, a lot of questions. I've gotten some text messages. I'm sure you have. Can you break down and put in context the impact this shutdown is having, will have on folks, especially here in the Carolinas?
Well, at first, it's really not going to be felt by a lot of people, except, of course, federal employees. A lot of the federal employees who are deemed essential are actually still going to have to work. They just won't get paid. So when you go to the airport, those TSA officers might be a little surly because they have to be there and they're not getting paid. Now, that said, most essential services that people think of, like getting Social Security, that's going to continue. There'll be a few things like verifying your eligibility that might not happen. Social Security is funded a little different. So disability insurance, Social Security payments, that's going to continue. If this drags out, what could not continue would be a cost of living adjustment, which people, getting Social Security depend on. So if it drags out, that could happen. The other thing that could impact people directly is the Federal Reserve, who determines interest rates. They're poised for another interest rate cut, which actually Trump wants. But if they can't get data from government agencies like labor data, unemployment, consumer price index, then they don't have enough information to make the cuts that a lot of them are actually leaning towards doing. And those agencies will be shut down. Now, in general, the shutdown's going to continue because Trump actually wants it to happen. He wants a showdown. He says he's going to use it to cut programs that Democrats like. Democrats are going to continue it because, unlike last time, they don't have any senators in a vulnerable position. Previously, there were some moderate Democratic senators in states that they needed to hold on to. Now those moderates are gone. So the Democrats don't need to capitulate in order for some of their members to get reelected. They're going to hold on for those Medicare and health care supplements to be added back in.
What does this say? And I'm curious to hear your answer on this one. This is the third time President Trump has presided over a federal funding lapse, government shutdown. What does this say about the political climate right now in our country?
Well, we're more polarized really than we've ever been. And part of that is because our political leaders are more polarized. So in the past, even when the public seemed very polarized, and they really weren't, they were closer together on most issues than people thought. Our leaders, especially in the Senate, were pretty close together. That's no longer true. The polarization is now at all levels. In the Winthrop poll, the poll we do, we are finding more and more people thinking the other side will not govern ethically if they are in power. So what that means is you're willing to interrupt the democratic process to ensure that your side stays in power because you believe if the other side gets in power, they will be immoral and unethical. And we've never seen that degree of polarization before. And that's why we're going to see fights like this. Really, they've been kicking the can down the road constantly for the past several years with continuing resolutions, which just means we're going to keep paying for things the way we have in the past. We're not going to fundamentally change the budget. But we passed a big budget bill. I think Trump called it the big, beautiful budget bill And now, before it takes effect, the Democrats are going to shut it down. So this is kind of a big showdown, a little different, a lot different than continuing resolutions in the past.
And just to follow up on that, it's hard to ask this question honestly because there are people that are impacted, real people that are impacted by this. But what are the political implications of this for both Republicans and Democrats?
Well, usually anything bad that happens to the economy lands in the president's lap. After the Employment Act of 1946, where the president was given more power to sort of guide the economy, a good economy, a bad economy, whether true or not, landed in the president's lap. Bill Clinton's a great example of this. The economy was going gangbusters when he was president. We actually had no deficits. We had surplus, but that was because of the internet boom. It wasn't really Bill Clinton, but he got credit for it. And the flip side is true as well. Presidents, whether they deserve it or not, get blamed. However, in our highly polarized environment, pretty much all strong Republicans are going to blame the Democrats, and all Democrats are going to blame Trump. So while it's usual for the president to get the blame for this, our very partisan, very polarized atmosphere could change that up. Now, what's important is going forward, how will this shutdown affect the economy? How will that affect independents and how they determine who's at fault here, Democrats or Republicans? Because it's going to be that independent vote, which could be critical in the 2026 midterm elections.
You mentioned former President Bill Clinton. So I'm looking at the past government shutdowns. We're talking about 2018 through 2019. That lasted about a month. 2013, President Obama was in office. And then 1995 to 1996, for those who remember, there was a government shutdown. Former President Clinton was in office. Have you been able to look back and see how maybe these situations, how we got to this point, this situation compares to those previous shutdowns?
Well, we can look at what started with Bill Clinton as sort of the first domino. That was when the very strong conservative Republicans took control of the House. And remember, it's the House that has the purse strings. They determine the budget. But the Senate then has to pass the budget as well. And that's where we are. Well, when Newt Gingrich organized the Contract with America when Bill Clinton was president, he was able to really rally the conservative troops and stand up against Bill Clinton and what Bill Clinton wanted to pass. And that kind of beginning of the strong conservative movement, first domino in this. And then after President Obama was elected, you see the Tea Party rise up. And the Tea Party Republicans in Congress, again, were willing to shut down Congress rather than pass Barack Obama's agenda. Now, the Tea Party movement, this ultra-conservative small government movement, got wrapped into the MAGA movement. And so now the members of Congress who are afraid of voting against President Trump because they absolutely don't want him endorsing an opponent in the primaries, they are going to stand with Trump for as long as they can. Now, if their constituents start really bucking against them because this drags out and something affects their health care, they might capitulate. But right now, I don't see them coming to the negotiation table anytime soon, especially when the Democrats are dug in and President Trump, as I said, is almost relishing the fight.
I gotta ask. I know we went down the timeline and great context as far as what the impacts and just previous government shutdowns. But what is the conversation like in the classroom for your students? Your students were not around. I don't even think they remember 2018, 2019 as far as what that government shutdown was like that lasted for more than a month. 2013 certainly. 1995, 1996. I mean that's a wash. Of course they don't. But what are the conversations in your classroom like?
Well, there is some selection bias when it comes to my classrooms because the kids in my classrooms are political science students. So they pay a little more attention to this. That said, the students who are paying a little more attention are still not sure what this means for them. A lot of them are asking, will this affect my loans? I'm not sure what's going to happen. Will this have any impact on me at all? None of them are talking about things like, hey, Trump is bailing out Argentina, but won't talk about a budget here. That's not even in the conversation for political science students. So I would hazard a guess that in non-political science classes, it's really not coming up because these young people are not directly feeling the impact yet. And the news has become so negative on every platform that they're using. You're seeing fewer and fewer young people tuning in. It's not until they get older and often out of college that they're beginning to tune into the news and feel it. And those are the people, in the workforce. The younger folks, unless we, the professors, talk about it, they're honestly not as engaged about it. It's not that they don't care. It's just that it's not on their radar. And political science students, it is a little bit more on their radar. But I would hazard a guess that non-poli-sci students, this really hasn't hit them yet.
Yeah. Interesting. One more follow up to that. I just got to ask. I know obviously your poli sci students are more invested in it, but with this generation, is it? Do you find it harder to have these conversations, especially surrounding the government shutdown and what's happening at the federal level?
Well, we have to give context in a different way. Ever since Plato, and I'm not kidding, ever since Plato, people have been saying, oh, this new generation, this young generation, they're terrible. All from thence forward, all through the 20th century, the kids are terrible. The kids are terrible. Well, they change, but they're no less terrible than when you and I and our parents were young. But they get their information in very different ways, which means when we talk about things with them, we have to give context in a different way, and often more context about, okay, here's how the bureaucracy works. You've gotten a 3-minute TikTok explanation. Let me explain the context of what that means. So when they get information, they're not getting it on the regular television as often. They're getting it streaming like now. They're getting it in little snippets. So what has changed for professors like me is really just the sense of context that they need. Other than that, students really haven't changed in my 30 years of teaching at the college level.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Different generation. No different outside of just the means of and how they get the news and how a lot of information is just pumped out, especially with social media. Dr. Scott Huffmon, thank you for your time. Great context, per usual, as always. Have to have you back again. Thank you for your time. I'm sure we'll have you back because I feel like there's a lot politically that we need to talk about and that we will discuss. But again, thank you for your time.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
Of course. All right, that is Dr. Scott Huffmon, political science professor at Winthrop University. A great breakdown there. If you missed that conversation, our incredible digital team will post that entire conversation on our digital platforms in just a moment.